Hello, beautiful human beings, and welcome back to the Ryan Magic Show. Today I've got a special guest who is my loving partner, Shahna. And today's episode is going to be pretty different to the normal episode because this is not going to be an interview, even though we will be throwing some questions and ideas out there to each other. The purpose of this episode is to have a vulnerable deep dive into just our relationship, the challenges that we go through, the hardships that we've been through, and just the way that our dynamic plays out, mainly because I feel there's a lack of transparency in the way that the average couple talks about what happens behind closed doors. So this is going to be our opportunity to let you guys in on just the truth of what happens in our relationship, the beauty of it, but also the challenge of it. Probably more focusing on the challenge so that we can give that transmission and bring some vulnerability to what it looks like to be in what our growth-centered relationship looks like. So thanks for joining me today. Beautiful.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm curious to see where this takes us.
Yeah. And do you want to share with the audience what it's taken for us to get here?
A long time. There's been a lot of resistance to this episode.
Yeah. We've both had a lot of resistance to this episode.
Yeah.
Even just before filming it. We were about to film and I was like, I'm way too hot in this room. And then we changed rooms and I was about to film and I'm like, I'm not comfortable. This is how it's like. All resistance manifesting. And we probably went to schedule this 10 times, I reckon.
Yeah, and we've changed the topic a few times to see if that would flow better and just like do a different episode before we did a relationship episode. But here we are. After a very long time. Let's see if we make it to the end.
We did one episode like a couple of weeks ago, and like 10 minutes in, I had so many relationship triggers coming up, or like things coming up for me, relationship anxiety and activations, that I just, like 10 minutes in, I just canceled the episode. I was like, I can't fucking do this. And just walked, and it triggered both of us. So this is feeling like a beautiful time to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that we've waited this long as well, because it's given us the time to understand each other, understand where we sit in the relationship. We're at a point where we're both pretty committed.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we're in a really good place right now.
Yeah, we're in a really good place, filled with the same challenges. Just the way that we're relating to the challenges has improved. So it makes sense for us to do this episode now. We feel safe enough. I feel safe enough to do it. Yeah. So cool. How about you kick us off, babe, with just sharing a little bit about what are a few of your favorite things about our relationship? Let's kick it off with that, and then we'll get into some challenges.
Yeah, a few of my favorite things. This is going to be difficult because I feel like there's so much I do love about you in this relationship. I really love our willingness to keep showing up, no matter what we face. So in the beautiful moments, in the more difficult moments, just how open and willing we are to keep leaning in, keep being there for each other, keep supporting each other in our missions, our purpose, whatever else is going on in our individual lives, and the way that we're able to bring that together as a couple. I think that's really beautiful. Our ability to communicate, and obviously we're not perfect, and I'll speak for myself. I'm not perfect when it comes to communicating, and there's a lot of like growth that I've undergone in the almost 2 years we've been together around our communication. But I really do feel like communication is one of our superpowers, and that's why we're still here and why we continue to be able to work through the difficult times and really celebrate the beautiful times too. So I love the communication that we have, and even when it's not perfect, like our willingness to keep trying until we're able to be heard and get our point across and share what's on our heart with each other. Yeah. I love the play and the fun that we have in the pockets in between the challenges, and how much we have in common, our value alignment, our love for growth, our commitment to our health, and just creating an epic, really fulfilling life.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Is there anything you want to add in there?
Well, they're yours.
Yeah.
So I'm totally open to sharing mine.
Yeah, I'd love to hear yours.
I'm just going to name, because I feel like this is coming up for a reason, but an example of what happens for me with my anxiety is like present right now in the connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like bringing it up is going to bring my trigger's present. Me bringing it up is going to trigger you.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be beautiful medicine for the episode.
Yeah.
Are you open to me sharing that?
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with me because I can sense your emotions here too. But just Shahna authentically sharing herself to me in this moment as like the gorgeous person that she is. Like I can smell her breath. She doesn't have objectively bad breath, but smell for me is such a trigger. And I can smell her breath. And I've got anxiety coming up throughout my entire fucking body right now. And like to the point that it activates me to just be terrified of intimacy. It's like the breath, the smell of the breath is like a way that my mind tries to register danger, because it's like I'm getting close to kissing, I'm getting close to lovemaking, I'm getting close to connection, intertwining with each other. And I just have a massive defense protection strategy that comes up around this thing. And it's coming up now. Like as Shahna was just sharing the most beautiful things about what she loves about our relationship, I just witnessed myself smelling it and starting to boil up inside and get like frustrated. And then I just noticed myself say like a bit of a narky remark, which was, well, that's your shares. I haven't shared mine. That was me trying to get control in the dynamic and bringing in like one of my big protectors, which is like this controlling part that tries to like put down, get control, be the one that's in charge. And yeah, that was coming up for me in that situation. And I'm actually feeling like I'm going to share a couple of things on this point, and then I would love to hear what you've got to say around this as well.
Yeah.
But what comes up for me massively with this relationship anxiety, relationship OCD, if you've listened to that other episode I've spoken, or looked at some of my posts, I've spoken about it a bit, but it's essentially relationships are so hard for me because at a core level, I had my trust betrayed multiple times by both parents growing up in really intense ways. And I felt super unsafe in these pockets where the trauma was created. And so my body does not want to be in a close, committed, long-term relationship. My body wants me to be by myself, where it can stay safe and not get hurt like I was hurt when I was younger. And so, yeah, just what happens is I've got these strategies. So when I start to get close, my body just kicks into gear and just goes, and my mind kind of team up to say, how do I create distance here? And so there was a little jab there. And that jab was an attempt to, where my mind just took control. The controller came in and just went, I'm going to poke at this. Is probably going to activate her insecurities. She's going to get distant. I'll stay distant. And we're not going to get close. So that's what came up for me.
Mm.
Thanks
for sharing.
You're welcome. And I can sense, this is our dynamic. This right now is our exact dynamic. But the reason I was sharing that last point or giving that context is because simultaneous to having these protection strategies, I also have a lot of shame around them. I feel like just really guilty. Like it's the last thing that I want to do to the person I love most is judge something like her breath or her looks or all the different things that I'll judge to create distance. But they come up as safety strategies, and usually straight away alongside it is heaps of shame. And so by sharing it and naming it in this episode, like I'm actually already feeling way more safe and way less triggered because the shame part has been dissolved by me I guess having the awareness and then courage to name what was present for me. So I just wanted to name that's what's alive for me, and I'm aware that you're in a different place in this moment. So what's alive for you, babe?
For me, what it brings up is like my insecurities around like what's wrong with me. Like, oh, my breath's bad, like what's wrong with me, even though, as you said, my breath, like, it's not objectively bad. It brings up those insecurities, and then like, oh no, people are hearing this, they're just going to think of me as the person with bad breath. And because I've had it so ingrained into me to be really like care so much about what people think, to me it's like a massive trigger to be like, oh, this feels so vulnerable, and there's a massive part of me that just wants to stop the episode,
of course,
and run away.
Yeah,
we definitely should have brought some tissues along.
I'll go grab some tissues.
Don't know what we were thinking there.
Yeah, I didn't think this would come.
I think we've got some here.
You know where your stashes are. Shahna's the master of emotional vulnerability, and she keeps stashes of tissues around the house and just secret drawers, like the cupboard behind you. I didn't even, like, I saw you pull some out the other day, and I was like, what the heck? I didn't even know there were tissues in there.
Yeah.
I don't think I've used a tissue since we've been in this house.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, I definitely like I'm good at feeling my feelings and have come such a long way in that. And while there are still insecurities, especially like in such a public forum like a podcast, I just think back to years ago when I was so disconnected from all of my emotions, and I'd bottle them down until I just couldn't bottle them down anymore, and then they would just erupt and I'd have like a full-blown breakdown. And then I'd be fine for ages. I'd suppress until it just built up so much. Whereas now I feel like I'm so much more in touch with my emotions, and I allow them to be there, not judging them as bad. And loving myself through the full spectrum of emotions.
Yeah. Shahna is like the superhero, like, of feeling, and triggers come up for us very regularly because I have this relationship anxiety thing. It's hypersensitive. I'm hypersensitive, and Shana's also hypersensitive. And so we cross-trigger each other with these dynamics, right? I have something coming up. I've got strong protectors, and then like just the energy of the protectors, you can talk about that. But I know that just the energy, without me even saying anything, could be enough to like create, to trigger the sensitivities for you to feel, oh no, I'm not safe.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So thanks so much for bringing your vulnerability into this episode.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sorry for that snappy remark.
Thanks for apologizing, babe.
You're welcome. And this for me has been something that's been like a really challenging balance within myself, to be able to be sorry and caring and compassionate about the situation without judging or shaming myself. It was like they go hand in hand. So it's like, it's almost like I felt like a villain because I shame myself so much for these protection strategies. And so it's like I felt like I had to stay in the role of a villain. You know, I see it in movies and stuff as well, where the villain's just like, everyone thinks I'm evil, so screw you guys. I'm going to like F everyone over. And that's almost the voice of my protector. So it's like, I feel actually really embarrassed and shameful for this, but I'm going to stand up for it because I don't want to show my cards of how actually terrible I feel about the whole thing. And so, yeah, by going, I love myself still, even though I had this thing come up, but I'm also sorry. That's like a real tricky balance for me to have. So anyway, yeah, I feel like I want to just put it over to you for a second. I'm just going to stop talking.
To keep elaborating on what's coming up for me, or
whatever you want.
Yeah, it's interesting, the dynamic of the double trigger, and how, because it would be so much easier to navigate in a way if like you get triggered, you're like, oh, the smell of your breath is triggering me right now. And then I was just like, it's not my problem. But because I take it personally, it does feel more difficult to navigate. And there are times where one of us will be not triggered by the other. So it's not every time there's a double trigger, but it's often. And learning to navigate that and be able to support each other while we're in triggers has been really healing in itself, because being able to hold space while also being triggered, I feel like it's teaching us a lot about creating safe space within ourselves while also being there for someone else and honoring what we need in those moments. And it's going to look different each time, but still being able to like remember that we're a team and know that we're just talking to another human who has their own internal landscape, and really try and rein back the projections and take ownership for our own triggers rather than just continuing the cycle of like, yeah, projecting or how the dynamics I see play out in conflict.
I'll be honest, I didn't take in all of what you said there. So I'm still kind of like
presence.
I lost presence. I'm also still kind of like half triggered, so I'm just doing my best.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to share that I noticed though is that your energy shifted massively when you kind of owned how you were feeling.
Yeah.
Did you notice a shift in like your emotions?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some more
there's still emotions there, but definitely I think this is the power in emotional vulnerability, like, and really owning that and not needing to hide. Yeah, I feel like we can be more ourselves rather than like being like, oh, what will people think of me when I'm here crying? I've got emotion coming up. And we can just be like, yeah, I'm here, I'm crying, and I love myself still. And ultimately, it doesn't matter what other people think of that. And just like really owning your truth in those moments. It really like shifts the energy, and it's so liberating, even though it can feel difficult in times. Like there's definitely an element of difficulty and resistance here because of my triggers and my wounds and like that underlying like, oh no, what do people think? But just reminding myself that it's like what I think is what I'm actually afraid of. So the less I judge myself, the less I care what other people think. And the more I can just be in my truth and actually just show up and show all sides of me and inspire others to do the same, rather than feeling the need to be like, oh no, let's start re-recording and like I'll hold it together. And like that in itself, that feels so restricting. That's a mask. Whereas because I'm being real, I'm being vulnerable, I'm letting down the mask, even though there's this part of me that thinks I have to show up in a particular way to be accepted or loved. It's so much more liberating when we can just be like, you know what, I love me and I can show all of me and not have to fit what society expects. And yeah, it's just that feels so constricting and it feels so fake to me. And I'm all about being authentic, and part of being authentic is sharing all of me, even when it feels really fucking scary.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for having the courage to be vulnerable. It's really inspiring. Often we're in dynamics where my protector is just like steam. It's kind of like the one that gains control, and it's like more of an avoidant kind of energy. And under that avoidance, under that controller is sadness and is grief and shame. But I'll tend to shy away from showing that. My protectors will do whatever they can to dance around that. And so, yeah, I really admire and appreciate your vulnerability with that.
Thanks.
And I feel like one thing that you were saying there that's powerful.
Just what?
Just what? Everything you said was powerful. One thing that stood out was just this idea of owning ourselves in relationship. And one thing that I've do as a protection strategy is feel superior. It's like an avoidant attachment style trait to kind of feel like I'm independent. I've got my stuff together. I'm doing well over here and I'm sovereign. And it's like a bit of a superiority complex, which is built on top of like lots of vulnerability. And in that case, it triggers your not enoughness because I'm judging you and finding ways for us to be on a mutual idea that I'm better than you. Because if I'm better than you, then either one of two things. Like if the relationship doesn't work out, it's okay because I can just find someone better. If I can just end the relationship because I'm not fully in. And if you chose to end the relationship, I still feel superior because it's like, well, I don't have to get hurt if I'm just staying on this pedestal, this that I've built for myself, all high and mighty, but ultimately feeling alone. And so the reason I'm pre-framing all that is because I feel that oftentimes in relationships, either during, when they're happening, or after, there's this idea that each individual can form in their mind that the relationship struggles are more because of one person than the other. Whereas one thing with all the coaching that I've done, because I'm a master of coaching relationships, just to be clear, I'm a master of coaching relationships. Very different story in the relationship, but obviously I do my best and I do a pretty solid job.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But one thing I notice is that I can see in every single time I've held space for a couple that the dynamic is exactly 50-50. Exactly 50-50. As long as a relationship is still going, there's two people in there, then it is 50-50 contribution to the dynamic. And that can, like, that's just important. So what you were saying about owning yourself, I feel like knowing that it's a 50-50 dynamic, if anyone that's listening to this is biting on the idea or listening to the story that they're more of the problem or that they're dating someone that's more superior, it's just not the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because I agree that it is always a 50-50, and it's like that balance of taking self-responsibility and knowing that you've got 50% contribution to the relationship. And if you are feeling like the problem is all yours, then it's time to kind of like shine a light on where your partner's also contributing or allowing, or where there's a discrepancy there. Or if you feel it's all them, then that's a really beautiful invitation into where am I actually also contributing to this? Because we are always contributing in some way. And that can be really hard to hear depending on the situation as well.
Yeah. And I'm definitely sharing this from the feeling within myself of that shame that I was talking about, where I've deep down felt like I'm unlovable and I'm not worthy of love. And then therefore projected that this situation of feeling better than. It's like I actually feel worse than underneath. I feel unlovable underneath, but I'm going to pretend that I'm above love or I deserve to love someone even better.
Trying to like overcompensate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that,
babe.
Thank you. And that feels really, it feels really painful. The emotion of shame. If you've seen the emotional frequency chart before, it's like that rainbow kind of spectrum of all the different emotions and how powerful the kind of more higher frequency vibration emotions like love, presence, enlightenment, joy, peace, they're like way up 500-600 hertz vibration, whatever that means. And right down the bottom, like 10 or 20 is like shame. Shame's like the lowest one. And so I feel like I'm healing some shame just by doing this episode.
Yeah, totally. Me too. And on that note of like the emotional frequency chart, I think it's really important to, and I'm sure your listeners know this because you've done so many incredible trainings about it, but to not demonize certain emotions. Like this shame is just there coming up, asking for your love, like wanting the light to be shone on it so that you can love that part of you that feels ashamed. Because if we just continue to suppress and hide and be like, no, I don't feel shame or I don't feel sad and just stuff it down, we're still carrying that frequency, even if we're not sitting in it. And I see often in the personal development space, it's kind of like that spiritual bypassing, focusing only what feels good. But in the act of ignoring those emotions, we're really doing ourselves a disservice because they're still in our field. We're still holding on to them because we're by not addressing them. What we resist persists. So it's still there, draining our energy and lowering our frequency. So opportunities like this to really transmute those lower frequency emotions and bring them to light are a real gift. And yeah, I'm all about encouraging people to lean into them more so that they can like let go of them and move into the higher frequency emotions where of course it feels better, but we can also find the beauty in the ones that are less comfortable.
Yeah. Beautiful share. Powerful share. And I feel like it's such a balance because like for us, like we're leaning in to help transmute shame, as you beautifully worded. And we didn't for ages.
Yeah.
You know, so we're talking, hey, it's so good to do this. We didn't do it for ages. We knew that it was an option. And we kind of
were doing it in our dynamic. And now we're doing it in public as well. And there have been spaces where we've done it. And I get what you're saying. But yeah, it's not like we've ignored all the shame for almost 2 years. It's like this whole time we acknowledge, we talk about it. And now it's time for bigger scale, bringing it to our public forum.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this doesn't have to be done on a podcast. You don't have to come on a podcast and share all your difficulties. This can literally be done just like with your partner or with a friend or with a family member or someone that feels really safe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful point. And thanks for reflecting that back so we can celebrate the fact that we show up in vulnerability all the time in our connection.
Yeah.
And the point there that I'm wanting to bring up into this space is that there's like this fine balance between leaning in and then honoring if you're not ready to lean in.
Totally.
And that's something that I feel will lead nicely into us talking about like intimacy.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like, for example, with the shame thing, sometimes it can be really powerful to just be like, I don't feel safe. And what you said there, because that would be fear as an emotion. If the fear is there, it's like, I'm afraid to show the shame. Maybe the fear and honoring the fear and saying, yeah, I can notice that I'm afraid and I'm actually going to honor that and I'm actually not going to lean in. That can also be powerful. And that's what we did with this episode, I think, at times as well, which can be like really, really important. Do you have anything you want to say on that?
Not in this moment.
No. How are you feeling in this moment?
Sensitive, but grounded. How are you feeling?
I was feeling a bit anxious because I was sensing into something in your field.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I could sense, yeah. What I was, are you open to me sharing what I was sensing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Maybe it's a blind spot for me.
Maybe, and maybe it's a mirror. So we'll see. And it's not about right or wrong, but I was just feeling that there was like hypervigilance or feeling potentially like what I was saying was going to make you wrong. And yeah, that's just what I was sensing into.
Yeah.
So I was just checking in on it because this is the purpose of this episode. It's just to bring in the vulnerability and bring in honestly what's coming up.
Totally. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for checking in.
You're welcome.
So one thing that I was kind of thinking would be a nice transition from what we're just talking about with the knowing when to lean in and knowing not when to lean in is that one thing that I feel is a superpower, and I agree communication is like a massive superpower, and we'll probably go deeper into that as well. But lovemaking and intimacy in that way.
Yeah. And that comes perfectly off the back of talking about shame as well, because I feel like a lot of people hold a lot of shame about intimacy and lovemaking and sexuality. Yeah, I'm talking about it in public forums. So yeah, beautiful transition in multiple ways.
Yeah, true. True.
Yeah.
So remember before the episode when I was sharing that intention around like one thing we're great at, it's like leaning in and that.
Yeah.
I was just talking about finding the balance between leaning in and knowing when it's okay to honor the fact that someone doesn't want to lean in. And I think intimacy is like a real delicate topic and one where we are really solid at finding a way to lean in intimacy. Yeah.
Yeah, and creating the safety, even if it wasn't there to begin with, or even if there was one of us that was having some resistance. Like, we're a really great team at creating safety for both of us and leaning in.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to share around this idea of leaning in, and like, can you share something? Or ask a question or something?
Yeah. I think, like, when it comes to intimacy and when it comes to being in like a monogamous relationship, the reality is like we are the only people that we are intimate with. And so it's such an important part of a romantic relationship that can often have a lot of like baggage around it, depending on people's individual experiences and where they're at with their sexuality. And yeah, I feel really grateful that we both continue to lean in and we are so open to intimacy and lovemaking, even in the times where we have triggers coming up or maybe there's a bit of a disconnection between us. It's one of our beautiful ways to reconnect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a real gift that we can use such a beautiful medium to reconnect physically and emotionally, energetically. Yeah, so for me, leaning in, it's really linked to just continuing to lean in the relationship because, as I said, we're the only people that we're intimate with. So shutting ourselves off to it and leaning out is like how you do one thing is how you do everything. It's like leaning out to the relationship. So the more we can come together and like make each other feel safe and continue to lean in, it's like a metaphor for us in all areas of our relationship.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's a really beautiful, sacred part of our relationship.
Mm. Yeah, I love that frame and that idea. And I remember reading an Alison Armstrong book, An Amazing Relationship, like author on relationships and the difference between men and women, masculine, feminine dynamics. And in her book, Celebrating Partnership, which is my second favorite book.
Oh, wow.
Next to Understanding Women, which is about understanding men and women pretty equally. That book, they're both epic books and they're both audio books where she's delivering a seminar and sharing through that medium. So it's very engaging because it's not just her rereading her own book that she's done. It's like it's a seminar and you can listen to it on Audible. Understanding Women and Celebrating Partnership. In Celebrating Partnership, she says the way that lovemaking should play out, or a really healthy frame to understand what lovemaking can look like in a relationship, is partner one says, "Hey, do you feel like making love?" And then partner two is like, "Nah, not really." And then partner one's like, "Cool, me neither. Let's do it." And I just love that frame. It's like you don't have to feel like it to lean in. And like if we use like we got so many examples of when both of us are so resistant to making love. And then the moment that we start, we're just like, we're so glad that we started.
Yeah, it's like, why were we resisting this?
Yeah. But there was so much resistance internally. And so oftentimes what happens with us, and what I feel happens, and you can jump in if you want, but there's this kind of like unspoken barometer of connection. And a lot of it is based, it's like the ultimate symptom is, are we making love consistently or not? Which is like a few times a week, sometimes every day kind of thing. If that's the flow, or multiple times a day. And if that's the flow, we kind of know, all right, we're connected, we're leading in. It's a bit of a barometer.
Yeah, and then the times where there's like more of a gap between lovemaking, it's like a sign of our disconnection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a bit of a symptom, right?
Yeah, totally. And it can be like a sign of us like being busier, but it's also just showing that there is a level of disconnect because we are going through a really busy time. So it is still a reflection of the connection. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And so that's kind of like the symptom. It's a bit of a barometer on that. And what we often find ourselves doing is like it gets to nighttime. We both have preferences for early nights. Different, either one of us can be more like anal at a specific time around I want to be to get to bed. So either I'll be like, up saying, hey, let's make love, it'll be later. Or I'll want to be asleep and Shahna will come in working late or something. And just then we'll be like, we don't have much time now to make intimacy work. And I find that most of the time, there's not like a massive desire from either of us to make love. Would you say that that's like most of the time?
Yeah, probably most of the time. There's definitely times where there is.
Of course,
but yeah, I'd probably say more often than not. Yeah, it's not a massive desire.
So to fill the gap there, that is sometimes we really feel like it. It's kind of like what's coming up as a metaphor of like a sales pipeline. And it's like sometimes you just get people that are like, yes, I want in, no sales required. They're not in the maybe category. They're in a hell yes category. And it's like 5% of the time. And then there's like hell no is like 10 or 20% of the people, the prospects. And then like the massive in between that is the difference between like an epic closer and someone that's like not good at all is that maybe. Can you turn the maybes into a yes? And that's kind of feels like it with desire with us. Like sometimes we're lucky and it's just like we both really want to do it. We're excited and there's this natural flow and it's super organic and easy. Most of the time we're in that in between.
Yeah.
Where it's like we either don't want to do it, like actually it's probably like 30%, 40% of the time it's like we probably don't feel like it. Maybe 50% of the time it's a maybe. And then like 10% of the time it's a hell yes. So I feel kind of true. That's kind of mine.
I feel like there's an in between there. There's like the hell yes, the yeah, I'm keen, and then the maybe, and then the no.
And what would you say the percentages of the hell yes and the keen?
Hell yes, probably 10%. Keen, maybe like 20 or 25.
Okay, cool. Keen.
Keen. Actually, this is another thing that we're both quite lucky with. Like we have a similar in the way that we have like a pretty good libido and sex drive.
Sure.
Yeah. And obviously there are these times where it's more of a maybe and it's not necessarily as prominent. But I think we're very compatible in that way of like wanting frequent lovemaking, whereas other people can have a very different libido and very different sex drive.
Yeah.
Or more of a mismatch between the partners.
Yeah, that's definitely true. The one thing that I find is interesting that's probably cool to talk about now is that my opinion is that libido, like natural libido, or like where someone's libido currently sits and then they're in their mind. I feel like everyone has an idea. I've got a high sex drive or a low sex drive or a moderate sex drive. Whatever that is in the present moment for someone, I perceive is a symptom of their safety strategies. So what I mean by that is that for me, lovemaking kind of like is a way that I also create safety. And I feel powerful when I make love. I feel in control, puts me in the dominant energy.
Yeah.
And so, and it's like, it makes me feel good enough conditionally. These are all fear drives for sex for me. I love it as well, the pleasure, sure. But I feel like from a safety, fear-based perspective, I derive safety through lovemaking a lot of the time. And I perceive for you as well, like there's part of your libido is based off the fact that feeling attractive, feeling worthy, feeling lovable comes from feeling desired. So it's like you could want to do it if you feel that I don't want to do it. Which is not just based on love. Sometimes it's based on fear of, he's not interested in me right now. Am I actually lovable? Whereas I feel like does that feel true for you? Just before moving on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the point that I'm making here is that a lot of people I perceive just don't derive safety through lovemaking.
Yeah.
That they derive safety from saying no, because that puts them in control from their partner. So it's like when it comes to sex, the way that they feel safe is like, I'm going to make sure that I'm the one that's choosing whether we have sex or not, because then I feel safe in the dynamic. I'm in control. I'm the one that's getting to call the shots. And it's not none of these things. I'm not consciously thinking, sweet, this is my opportunity to dominate. This is my opportunity to get into control. You're not thinking, sweet, yeah, I can feel lovable.
Yeah.
But it happens. And that's why we have an aligned desire for love, because we can want to make love when it's not just purely from love.
Yeah.
We could be in a lower state. And we're like, yeah, well, we're both up for it because we're both going to get our safety needs met through this.
Yeah. And even like when it comes to love languages, like physical affection and touch is my top one. So if it's not necessarily being met outside of the bedroom, that can be the place where it gets met for me.
Sure. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It's great awareness as well.
Yeah.
And so this is a bit of a meta idea, but I think it's really supportive to reflect on, are you someone in a relationship that tends to be the one with a lower sex drive or a higher sex drive? And what are the safety things that you get met that lead to that being higher or lower? Because I perceive if people are in their heart, they're not in a safety strategy and they're just like enlightened, then their desire for intimacy would be equal, is what I perceive. That's my perception. There's some little nuances there, like some people would have more of a value for physical touch and blah, blah, blah. But I really believe that people that say they've got a low libido actually just get their safety needs met by not engaging in intimacy, or because intimacy triggers massive unsafety, triggers shame, triggers insecurity. And so their association to it is like fear. It's like, of course, they're not going to want to go in there. But they can just use that story of, I'm someone with a low libido. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also like, I definitely agree that would be a big factor playing into it. But then there's also things like one's health. Like our libido is a sign of where we're at in terms of health. So the healthier we are, the higher our libido often is. Whereas like if we don't have the healthiest lifestyle, that impacts our libido because it's not at the forefront of our mind for survival. It's like our food needs need to be met.
Exactly.
It's kind of the energy is going elsewhere. So
Totally
libido is almost a sign of like overflow, like when we are in a really healthy, vital state.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And I feel like someone could be in the healthiest, most vital state ever and have really big negative associations to intimacy and then just like have a massive low libido, even though everything's healthy as well.
Yeah.
So I agree.
Well, our like wounds and our emotional health, our energetic health, that's all part of our health, really. We look at health as just like food, exercise, all this.
The eight areas of health.
But like, I really believe that we can be healthy on all these physical levels, but if we're not addressing the underlying trauma, our emotional health, our nervous system regulation, and the energetic baggage that we're carrying, like particular safety patterns that are playing out or past trauma around sexuality, that's part of health. So I'd actually say that's still linked.
I would say it's linked as well, but for the purpose of what we're talking about, I don't feel like it can be easily addressed. You know, if there's just like eat healthy, get enough sleep, someone might be able to rectify their diet and their sleep just by adjusting some routines and stuff. Yeah. Whereas someone might adjust their routines and have a really healthy lifestyle, like me, for example. I've been working deep on personal development and spiritual development and healing and trauma work and stuff for like 15 years. And I feel like I want to die when it comes to kissing sometimes. I feel like kissing means I'm literally feel like I'm going to die. So it doesn't feel like a fair, like that metric in the spectrum of intimacy doesn't feel like a fair, because then someone could be like, okay, cool, you've addressed your diet, you've addressed your sleep, you've addressed your movement, you're moving regularly, and you've gone and seen a naturopath and you've ironed out your nutrition and stuff, and cool, now you just do some trauma healing and now we've just ticked all the boxes and you should have a high libido. Whereas it's possible for someone to nail it and just feel like they hate intimacy and they just don't value it. Sure, it's okay. But, you know, I don't really, you know, it's not a big thing for me. And that's what they're saying. They're like, look, I've got everything. And my health's awesome. My vitality's epic. But, you know, I just don't have a high sex drive. And it's like, no, you've got a deep, unprocessed trauma where you associate that you're going to die if you go into intimacy because you're going to lose control or whatever it is. So we're super lucky. I feel like, or at least for me, the purpose of talking about intimacy is that we get to times super consistently, like every night, every couple of nights, where we're laying in bed, it's just past when we wanted to go to sleep. And we're already just past when we wanted to go to sleep. Should we squeeze in intimacy?
Yeah.
And it's just like, we could do it. A lot of the time I'm feeling anxious. So the idea of kissing just makes me feel so freaking anxious. And so it's like, I wish I was already asleep. I feel like kissing is going to make, I just feel so resistant to getting close. I just want to turn over. I don't even want to be in the same room. I just wish I was by myself with not another human within 100 kilometers of me. It's how I feel sometimes. But then I'm sitting there and I'm feeling so anxious. It's already past when I want to be asleep. But inside of myself, I know if I can just manage to lean into intimacy, I'm going to be closer to what I want in our relationship. And then I will just utter the words, are you open to intimacy? And even just holding the frequency, or holding the tension of being the one that's asked, are you open to intimacy? And then you'll be like, oh, let me think into it. And all I want to say is, I don't even want to fucking have intimacy right now. So step up. I'm feeling so anxious. Screw you. And it's just sit in the tension. Do you feel like intimacy tonight? Instead of saying, do you feel like intimacy? Because I don't. I really freaking don't. So just lean in. It's I don't want to do it either. Just sitting in it, you can feel the passion, because it's so difficult for me to lean into intimacy. It is so challenging. But I do it pretty much every time. Pretty much every time I'll lean in anyway, and we'll find a way to kind of talk through it. Maybe could you start by giving me a little massage, or can you start with this sexual act first, or something? And or would you be open to doing it without kissing tonight? And we just find a way to start.
Yeah.
And we also have this open narrative of this might just be getting one in the bag, and we don't enjoy it, but tomorrow night will probably be a lot easier, and maybe
more connected,
and we'll feel a lot more connected tomorrow as a result of today. But then tomorrow night might not even be that deep and connected. We might be making love tonight for 2 nights time.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of an accepted thing. Let's just get it done. Let's
get it done.
Seriously, sometimes it is, because it's a survival thing. It's it's almost like saying, cool, I've got to swim through this river with crocodiles in it, and I might die and I might not. That's what it feels like in my body, even though you're laughing.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not meaning to laugh at you. Just it feels extreme, but I understand that's what's coming up for you internally.
Yeah, it feels very extreme. I've spoken to you about the dreams that I've had recently.
Yeah.
I literally have had dreams over the last week that I'm going to be killed by a bear or killed by some creatures. And it's just bad dream, bad dream, bad dream. And it is 100% a metaphor for how I feel in the relationship. And I've said that to you. I'll wake up and it's the feeling that I had in the dream, feeling like I was going to be killed, is the exact feeling in my body that I experienced right before kissing you or us making love. So the reason I'm talking about this passionately is because there's so much trigger there, because I've experienced so much pain and anxiety over the last couple of years since I've really been leaning into a safe relationship with the fear of getting hurt and whatnot, but also to hopefully inspire you guys to be if we can do it when that's how we're feeling, if I can do it when that's how I'm feeling, it's worth it. If you don't have the symptoms that I'm talking about, where you feel like you're going to die, and we still find so much benefit and value in it, it's it's a big one that's either can be a really big asset or a big liability.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've just ranted hard on this. There's a lot of charge around it.
Yeah. I think I just want to add, while majority of the time we do lean in, we also discern what is going to be best for us. So there are some times where we don't lean in, and sometimes that's the better decision. So it's not saying that leaning in is the right thing every time. It's coming back to that discernment of knowing what's best for you in the moment, or what's accessible to you in the moment. There are some times where one of us is feeling so unsafe where the thing we need to do to honor our need is actually not lean in.
These are two projections because my whole rant was about my status on it, and this is Shahna's projection because I'll lean in even when I don't feel like it.
Yeah, well, because you don't feel like it a lot.
Huh?
Because there's a lot of time where you don't feel like it.
Yeah. And Shahna honors her own needs when required. So
there'll be times where, I don't feel safe, or I really am just past my capacity in terms of being really tired, and it's like way past our bedtime, and I'm like, no, actually tonight I need to not lean in.
Yeah.
So, and it's different every time, but it is about like really honoring our needs. And sometimes your need is to lean in into the discomfort, into the fear. And sometimes my need is to, honor the fact that it's like tonight it just doesn't feel aligned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you share a little bit more about to them for people that are in this situation? Because I can preach the message of leaning in when you don't feel like it. And you can preach that message as well, because often that's what you're doing as well.
Yeah.
But I'd love for you to support, because that's what, when we transition to sexuality, the transition point for me was sometimes it's solid to lean in, like what we're doing with this podcast.
Yeah.
But we also chose not to for 9 times or whatever it was. And that's solid because we had our own back there.
Yeah.
And we honored the fact, hey, we feel scared and we don't have the capacity. That's what you're talking about in sexuality.
Yeah, totally.
So what are I feel that most people will, in a safe, healthy romantic relationship, not a trigger-free zone, but a long-term romantic relationship, most people would benefit from leaning in more, is my perspective.
Yeah.
What are the times for you where you really feel like to lean in those times would make things worse for yourself or the connection?
Yeah, I think if there's like a really strong like feeling in my body that I'm like, no, this isn't right for me right now. This doesn't feel aligned. It doesn't feel like I have the capacity for this. I'm not feeling safe enough, whatever the reason is. But if in my body there's like this strong kind of like it doesn't feel right, then if I were to lean in, I'm going against my truth in that moment. And I'm kind of like abandoning my own needs or betraying my needs in the moment. And I get that this is kind of like contradicting what you're saying, because you're saying like
it's not necessarily
often,
though.
Yeah. Okay.
It can, but let's find the line. There's not an intellectual line, by the way, that's like always like this or always like this, but it's worth speaking to.
There's a lot of grey zone here.
There's a lot of grey zone. But there's so many times where we're in the grey zone, and it's like there's so many times where you're like, I don't want to. And I'm like, I don't want to, but I feel we should.
Yeah, but sometimes that's the difference. It's like, I don't want to. But then there's other times where it's like, no, this really doesn't feel right for me.
Yeah.
And like when I go against that can bring up old wounds around like sexuality and like not having my boundaries on it or having things like forced upon me. Yeah. So I think that's the fine line where it's like, if I'm like, no, okay, I know this isn't right for me, being able to speak that and say that and have that respected, which you're really good at, that's going to be more powerful than me leaning in and going against what my body was telling me or what felt true in my heart, in which case then I'm just going to feel like I'm abandoning myself or going against my needs or leaning into like the pleaser or just, kind of like bringing up old traumas.
Absolutely.
So I feel like that's the distinction, because it's like there is a difference between wanting and there's another difference between being like, no, my heart is telling me no right now, or my gut's telling me no, whatever that feels like for the listener. Big difference between I can't be bothered because it's too late and like, no, like this is not what I need right now. Like what I need right now is to be in my space and to go to sleep, or what I need right now is to honor my needs.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy, because then there's times where if I say no, it can bring up like rejection wound for you. So there can also be that part of me that's like, oh no, just say yes, because I don't want to trigger you and bring up, like, make you feel rejected, because I don't want to reject you. I love you and I want you to know how much I love you. So it's that balance of,
but
like,
it's also
honoring.
you're afraid of
The reaction.
you're afraid of the reaction. So it's not just because you love and care about me. That's there.
It's part of it. But it's
there.
not the whole story. You're right. Yeah.
This is what pleasers do. I'm a pleaser as well. This is what we do. We try to blanket our truths.
I'm doing it for you.
I'm doing it for you.
Where
it's like, come on. If we're getting true here, it's for ourselves. But I feel like this is something that we've gotten really good at, because how often now, through practice, would you, because at the start I used to pretty much just have tantrums. I was so controlling and manipulative because I was so afraid of being rejected that I'd like try to guilt trip her into making love, because I was like, I didn't want to feel the tension of feeling rejected. But I always apologized after, which might be the next morning or it might be later that night. But now that doesn't really happen. Which is pretty cool.
It's incredible.
And I think you've got better at honoring your no's
and communicating in a loving way, rather than just being like, no, like being able to say, it's really not feeling aligned for me right now, but it's not about you. Like, I really look forward to, like, connecting with you and having intimacy with you at another time, like kind of bringing those things in. I feel like that has helped, because then it's not like a straight just no. It's like, well, why is she saying no? It's like there's still a desire to want to lean in, maybe just not in that moment. So
this whole episode, which we're going to start to bring home on the final stretch here for this episode, but we're going to come back and do these consistently. I don't know how regularly, but like how often, but we are going to continue to do these. But one of the big themes has been like vulnerability and sex. And one thing I just want to say on this note is that there's not a rut. There is often a time when like the strength of a no is clear, and there's sometimes where like whether it's a yes or a no is kind of like debatable. And like you might be saying like no, it feels like a no, but it could also be a yes. And there's times where it's like you just know it's a straight no. And that's based on your trauma, right? So when it's a no for you, it's because in your body there's times where you've said yes when you didn't want to in the past. And you've got a lot of emotion connected to this, where you've gone against your own boundary and have sexual trauma from like betraying yourself in those moments when it was a no, but there was some like subtle sexual abuse essentially, right? And so Pete, the reason I'm pre-framing this is because there's people that are listening to this that have low libidos because their version of what you have is like 10 times more extreme. Where they'll just blatantly raped or they'll just massively sexually abused in lots of cases. Or maybe it wasn't like a really like big objective thing, but to them it just was really confronting and scary, and that's equally valid. But it's easier for me to navigate these situations where you have a no because you also have a lot of safety that's built from saying yes. So it's like, but for some people, and some people I've been with, they're just like flat out no's most of the time. And there's some people that won't make love for 6 months in a connection. And, you know, so, and that's based on them having massive sexual trauma. So for them, towing the line between a no and a yes, it's just a game of being able to honor what you choose and have an open conversation, take responsibility for one's trauma. So if you're someone that's got a low libido, being able to find out the reasons why that's the case and take ownership for it is important, so that there's not like white lies or lies that are just in the shadows, not like I'm consciously choosing to lie here, but just dishonesty that exists because someone doesn't understand their traumas. Because so often I just know people are just like, I've got a low libido, but they're not taking ownership for the fact they've got sexual trauma. And so it's just a flat out, I'm not willing to do anything about this. It's just because I've got a low libido, versus I really feel scared in intimacy, and that's my thing. And I know it's important to you and to me to not feel unsafe in something that's like one of a really meaningful part of the human experience. And so I'm going to work on that over time. And I'd like to work with you as a team so that we can create as much safety for both of us as we navigate through.
Yeah, beautiful, babe.
Yeah. And one thing that I think is also powerful as well is if each person is honest enough to share what their desires are. This is something that we both have the opportunity to grow with, but we're pretty solid with it, is asking for what we want. So let's say, for example, you're like, no. Sometimes you're like, I'm a no to intimacy, but I'm open to giving to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a powerful frame.
Yeah.
What's powerful as well is for me to have the confidence to say, hey, if you don't feel like it, it feels important to me. Can you offer something, or is there a way that you can give to me? Because this feels like a need or this feels like it is a strong desire. Can you please, if you don't feel like doing it like this, what can you offer? Is there anything that you can offer or give? And that's me going, I love myself enough to say, hey, this is important to me.
Yeah.
But because for us as normal members of society and everyone else, it's just all other people as well, just collectively, there's so much shame and unsafety, like you were saying earlier, around sexuality, that there's a lot of uncommunicated desires and a lot of resentment.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
All right, I feel like I'm going on a tangent here. It's not like necessarily about our relationship. It's just turning into a sex talk.
That was your true desire through this episode, wasn't it?
I love talking about sex. It's fun.
Yeah, it's a great topic.
I love having it as well, but I mean, like, arguably, like, it's pretty pleasurable to talk about it as well. Oh, so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel super grateful for you coming on today. Is there anything else that you feel called to share on the topics that we've kind of already covered, or anything that just feels pressing that you want to share about our connection here?
No, I feel pretty complete in like what we've discussed, and there's so much more we could talk about and many other tangents we could go on, but yeah, I feel like that will come in future episodes. So
yeah.
Thank you for having me on and
You're
for
welcome.
this open, vulnerable conversation. And
yeah, I really hope you guys got value from that, because there was a lot of tangents. I know you guys would have gotten value, but there's a part of me that's just like needing to accept how different that episode was.
Yeah, to your normal episode.
To normal episodes. Yeah. And like, it's funny because I get so much safety and control by being the one that's speaking. Hence why I definitely would have spoken more in this episode. But I was constantly stopping myself from talking to give you the opportunity to talk, which is also a communication piece for us.
Yeah. Yeah, it is something that we work on in the relationship where, yeah, creating more even distribution of talking. Yeah, especially when triggers and conflict come up. Like that can be a time where we have very different ways of handling and navigating that. And that's probably something that does need another episode to dive into and unpack. But yeah, it is like a reflection.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of dynamics at play, because even throughout the episode, I was like constantly intentionally not talking to give you the space to talk.
Yeah.
And so that was like my OCD of like, I'm a speaker. This is how the format of the podcast shall be. It's like not tying off loops and blah, 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 letting it flow. But I want to honor us for being willing to go into trigger in a public setting and still somehow hold it together. Because there were definitely times like when I named earlier where I was feeling non-present. Yeah. Because I was just triggered. Yeah. It's like when we get triggered, our prefrontal cortex shuts down and we go into our amygdala and we can't think straight. So it's like, yeah, I think we did awesome.
We did. Go us.
Go us. So, guys, I would love if you don't already follow Shahna to go check her out on Instagram. Is that where you'd like to direct people?
Yeah. Yeah. And feel free to shoot me a message. My Instagram is at Shahna Sarpi. That's spelled SHAHNASARPI. Yeah, shoot me a message. Let me know any like key takeaways, or if you gained value from this episode or anything that resonated. Love to hear from you. And I'm sure Ryan's the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
And for our connection, the reason that it's because we both have a vision of running events, workshops together, retreats together, teaching together.
Mm.
But I've personally resisted it a lot. And I know you have as well at times because of the instability of the connection, because this first 2 years has been a foundation building for us. Like you saw, triggers can come up so easily, like the breath thing. And then for a long period of time, it was like, we're getting triggered and it's hard. Are we even meant to be together? Versus we're getting triggered and it's hard, but we love each other and we're committed. And that's essentially what's changed.
Yeah.
To create a readiness for us to share more together. Hence this episode just kind of organically happening at this stage in the relationship after a couple of years. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that. I can't even remember why. It's just like also triggers still coming up. But anyway, that's this episode. Check out Shahna. Go follow her on Instagram. And if you've got anything to share with us, we'd love to hear from you guys. Yeah, that's it. Peace. Yeah.